My wife hadn't even stopped bleeding into the paramedic's gloves when my phone buzzed with an HOA violation. $500 unauthorized lawn access with a screenshot attached. And the screenshot, it was her strapped to a gurney gown, soaked crimson face, blurred just enough to look procedural. That image didn't come from a hospital. It came from a hidden camera in the garden gnome by the fountain. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a community, it was surveillance with mulch and roses. My name is Sean Maddox. I moved to Cypress Ridge with my wife Elena after her seizures got too frequent to manage alone. We thought this place was quiet, safe, a neighborhood where she could recover with walks to the park bench she loved. Instead, it became the stage for the most humiliating chapter of our lives. The president of our HOA, Lorraine Harper, ran the place like a monarch. She didn't care that my wife had collapsed. She cared that the ambulance wheels touched the grass. I confronted her the next morning at the clubhouse. She was rearranging flyers about new mulch guidelines, cool as ice, like the woman had never seen blood in her life. I put the screenshot on her desk. "You used this to find me?" I asked. She didn't even blink. "Rule's the rule, Mr. Maddox." That smug smile, like she was in control of every square inch of this neighborhood, including my wife's dignity. I leaned in and told her, "That camera caught an ADA-protected health crisis, and I'm a HIPAA compliance officer. You don't get to turn trauma into a trophy." She smoothed the corner of a flyer and said, "You'll regret threatening me." And that's when it began. The fines kept coming. A trash can out 15 minutes early because I had to get Elena to a follow-up appointment. Aggressive posture, apparently, during my last HOA meeting. Neighbors started whispering. Mrs. Hargrove got fined for having her grandkids visit. Curtis, a disabled veteran, was cited for his wheelchair ramp, even though the city had permitted it 5 years ago. It was never about rules. It was about control. Every porch light felt like a spotlight. Every birdhouse looked like a camera. And I started to wonder if maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I just played along, kept my head down, this would blow over. Elena. God, she asked me one night, half-drugged on seizure meds, if she had embarrassed the HOA. That question ripped me apart. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was stirring this up. Maybe silence was safer. For a moment, I thought about giving in. But then I went down to city records. I pulled every file Cypress Ridge had ever submitted. Permits, landscaping approvals, architectural changes, and nothing about cameras. Not a line item, not a contract, nothing. Just a vague little note. Motion passed. HOA president granted discretionary authority for community enhancements. Discretionary authority. That was her loophole. She buried surveillance equipment under seasonal landscaping. And then came Evan Carver, the treasurer. Quiet, meticulous, the kind of man who looked like he could file your soul. I cornered him at a recycling drive. He denied it first, but then his jaw tightened, and he admitted it. Lorraine had hidden surveillance equipment inside decorative gnomes and lamps. "I didn't know about the gnome cameras," he whispered. "She tagged it as landscaping." He looked over his shoulder. "She's pushing for audio next." That was the shift. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. Days later, an anonymous email hit my inbox. No greeting, no sign-off, just a Dropbox link. Inside, shaky video clips of my neighbors. Curtis hauling groceries, kids on tricycles, me waving down the ambulance the night Elena collapsed. Every clip time-stamped, every clip tied to an HOA citation. At the bottom, she has more. This is only what I could extract. You're not the only one. I didn't need a signature. I knew it was Evan. I went looking, and sure enough, behind the ornamental grass by the fountain, I found it a garden gnome, its eyes reflecting perfectly black glass. Camera lens, bolted under pine mulch, stamped with Night Garden 17. Illegal tech disguised as lawn art, funded by discretionary spending. That's when I told Elena, I'm going to expose this. She looked me dead in the eye and whispered, "She'll come after you." I said, "I'm counting on it." The next escalation was a compliance review. Lorraine herself showed up in a black Lexus with one of her enforcers. They strutted through my house like investigators opening cabinets, measuring porch rails, scribbling on clipboards. At one point, she lingered by the pill organizer on our kitchen counter like my wife's medication schedule was an HOA violation. I stayed calm, recording everything with a body cam clipped inside my collar. The moment they left, I uploaded the footage to cloud backups and called an old colleague. Lena Dorsey, Channel 8, investigates. She specialized in privacy abuse stories. I sent her a teaser. She called me back in an hour. This isn't HOA drama. This is surveillance abuse. Let's talk. Evan showed up that night with a manila envelope. He looked like a man walking contraband across enemy lines. Inside expense logs, budget amendments, vendor notes. Nearly 30 grand funneled into aesthetic improvements and safety allocations, all going to Night Garden Systems. He admitted it. He signed off. But then he pulled out a photo of his daughter, a little girl in a blue dress, gap-toothed smile. He whispered, "She visited last weekend. We played catch near the fountain." The next morning I got a citation, "Children must remain in approved zones." She sent me a clip of my daughter and told me to rein her in. His hands were shaking. He looked at me and said, "I'll testify." That was the crack in the wall I needed. We built a dossier, me, Evan, and Lena's team. Clips, contracts, timestamps, budget fraud, everything. Curtis agreed to speak. Mrs. Hargrove, too. Families who'd stayed silent started to come forward. One was fined for too many wind chimes, another for curtain glare, one for prolonged porch occupancy. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so damn sinister. Lorraine had weaponized paperwork into humiliation. Channel 8 scheduled the segment for prime time. I didn't watch it on my TV. I watched the neighborhood. At 6:03, screens flickered on behind curtains. Faces leaned toward living room light. By 6:07, neighbors stood in their driveways with phones in hand. At 6:11, Evan texted me, "One board member just quit. Lorraine's losing it." By 6:21, Lorraine stormed out of her house, clipboard in hand, barking into her phone. But no one followed her. That night she called an emergency meeting. She called it Community Integrity Forum. No mention of the broadcast, no mention of resignations. Just spin. The community center was packed, overflow parking people standing shoulder to shoulder. Lorraine stood at the front with her two remaining board members, mic in hand, smiling like she still had control. Cypress Ridge has always prioritized safety, order, and community values, she began. But then Mrs. Hargrove stood. "My grandkids were fined for laughing on the porch. I saw the footage on the news. You filmed them without permission." Lorraine stammered. Curtis raised his hand. "You record my front door every time I bought groceries." Another voice from the back. "You cited me for my dog barking. Was that from a hidden camera, too?" The room started to swell, murmurs turning into questions, questions into anger. I stood and said, "These cameras weren't for safety. They were for control. Hidden in gnomes, lamps, birdhouses, paid for with falsified landscaping bids, backed by silence." I held up the contract, the expense log. "I have proof, and I'm not the only one." That's when Evan walked up beside me. He didn't hesitate this time. He lifted a stack of papers and spoke into a mic. "My name is Evan Carver. I was your treasurer. I signed some of these budgets." Lorraine hid surveillance equipment and discretionary funds. She filmed residents without consent. She retaliated against dissent. And I can't stay silent anymore. Effective immediately, I resign and I motion for a community vote to remove Lorraine Harper from the HOA presidency. Gasps. Then movement. Ballots passed out, boxes checked. One by one, neighbors who had never dared to raise their voices walked forward to hand in their slips. Lorraine's face cracked. Her hands clenched the mic so tight her knuckles went white. The final tally was written on a whiteboard: 79 to remove. 3 abstained. 1 voted to keep her. She didn't wait to hear it. She dropped the mic, heels clicking down the hallway door, slamming behind her. And just like that, the woman who had ruled this neighborhood with silence was silenced herself. For the first time in months, the room wasn't quiet. It was alive. And the lesson: privacy isn't a privilege handed down by a board. It's a right you fight for the second someone tries to take it away.